takes forever to give birth to an elephant. And they're very stationary. They're very easy to hunt.
The marathons, the riots, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah. And even if the elephants know there's somebody out hunting elephants, pretty hard to hide.
Yeah.
Like, right? So I hate saying it, but I think, over time, and I think in 1,000-year horizons, one of the things I like to do is I believe Bitcoin has a chance to be money for the next 1,000 years. As long as we don't F it up, it will be. So, but elephants, if we have nothing but elephants, at some point, the equivalent of Elizabeth Warren is going to be the head of state. Might not be Elizabeth Warren, but somebody like her will be the head of state. And they will go hunting elephants first and foremost. So elephants that can't move, that are highly exposed, that are very visible, they're going to be subject to those attacks.
We don't even have to look further than the current administration in office. I mean, the Biden administration proposed a 30% tax on miners. I mean, that would literally put half of the publicly traded companies, probably all of them, mostly all of them, out of business. I mean, they literally overnight make America no longer competitive to do Bitcoin mining, essentially. Kind of wild.
Absolutely. Things can happen. Like we talked about, change in some aspects can come very, very rapidly. And
I mean, I can't think of an industry that could just all of a sudden absorb a 30% tax on their business activity. I mean, can you? I mean, I'm thinking maybe like big tech, but other than that, where there's like super high profit margins on like SaaS businesses maybe, but like any other like commodity producer or, brick and mortar operation, manufacturing, I mean, that literally just wipes you off the map.
Yeah. And, I'm not telling anybody who to vote for, but it's fairly apparent that
it's very
Harris and her crew, which, she's aligned with Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, AOC, like those sort of things. They're not the friends of our community.
There's no doubt about it. So from Choke Point 2.0 to the SEC attacks to, all this crazy stuff we're seeing. I mean, at this election cycle, I mean, these people need to be sent packing, and they need to re-examine their positions on technology and innovation and, pushing. I mean, just think about all of the software developers that are fleeing. Not just talking about just Bitcoin, but, the Web3 space in general, right? The trillions of tax revenue over the next couple decades that the U.S. is potentially losing out on, the job creation opportunities. I mean, this is like, imagine if we would have done this during the early internet days, if we would have forced all of these internet entrepreneurs and companies out of the U.S. Sure, there was scams. Sure, companies failed, but, that's why we have a free market, right?
Absolutely. And I think maybe talk about this in a minute, but we'll kind of wrap block space into some of the nation state stuff and all that in a minute. But that threat is real. So that's the elephants, though. It's the really big boys with the big sights. In the middle are horses. Horses would be small to medium sized commercial class miners. I think you and I both fit into that class. It could be a site of a few hundred kilowatts to a few megawatts, maybe even into the high single digits or low double digit sites. Most of the time in that class these days, those are built in a modular fashion. You see a lot of container-based stuff. You also see a lot of what I call wild horses, meaning that you can apply to any of these site sizes either the term wild or captive. And the word wild largely means that you are in an unpermissioned environment, that you do not have to have somebody else's permission to get your energy or to operate. And
you've repeatedly said that this is very important.
Yes.
Right? I mean, this is like this idea of wild mining
is very important because, we were kind of on it right here, right? So if a 30% tax on energy consumption is imposed on miners in the U.S., well, if you happen to be producing your own energy, like for instance, we own a hydroelectric site, if you're on a stranded gas site, if you're coming off of wind power and you're behind the meter, you have a chance of surviving that. And at a minimum, it's not going to be some external force that just cuts the power to your site because you're not complying. And I think the other thing is captive permissioned also applies to other things. For instance, we talked about pools before. Well, clearly the big pools are supported by the big miners. Foundry and Ampool have some very large customers, name guys that you would recognize. Well, there's several reasons why those companies direct their hash rate at those pools. And they're not all financial, by the way. They have to do with regulatory compliance, plausible deniability. Like they I don't want to call out specific names, but let's just say a lot of them don't want to create templates. They don't want to make the decision about financial transactions. They just want to get paid for hash rate.
Yeah.
Period. And they view the legal risk of, let's say, being a template creator as being something they don't want to take on. Their legal department doesn't want to worry about OFAC compliance. And if somebody comes in and says, well, you're not OFAC compliant, and you can say, well, I'm just using the Foundry pool and they're OFAC compliant, so I'm clean, versus, let's do an audit of all the blocks that you produced or tried to produce and see what sort of transactions were in there. So it's my belief that mathematically we need 30% of the network hash power to be horses and rabbits to stay in somewhat of a safe zone, so that the integrity of what I think most people consider to be Bitcoin, this thing that is censorship resistant, that is allows self-custody, that has this immutability, that has these sort of key tenets, we need about 30%. And about 30% of it should be wild too. So you could have some wild elephants, some small elephants may become wild too, but we need both of those things on a global basis, I think, to maintain ourselves in a safe zone. That doesn't mean if we drift under those numbers that Bitcoin blows up immediately. But now we're in a very dangerous situation where a directed attack on the network now has some probability of success. And I should point out, some people have accused me of being an alarmist in the past. And I told you the story about batteries before.
Yeah. I mean,
right?
That was your job, right? You want to make
it's my job. Yeah. I am an alarmist. I worry about things that are 1 in 10,000 probability or 1 in 1,000 probability, because I'm thinking about 1,000 years. I'm not thinking about today or next year or next week. I'm trying to say, hey, I said, I'm 60 years old. I won't be here to see the end of this thing. What I hope to be able to do is contribute in some way to create the anti-fragility and the security of this thing, and promote this to the generations that will follow, so that they don't forget, right? Because I think we talked a little about history, something like history has a tendency to repeat itself, right? Well, if you don't teach people history, if the legitimacy of the threat can't be tasted and touched and felt by these subsequent generations, they're going to fall into the trap. There will be constant centralization forces, always moving. Like anything that gets big and successful is going to naturally try. There's an inherent gravitational force towards centralization. Yeah. Right.
I do like the sort of the game theoretical incentive that if these elephants are attacked by governments or whatever it may be, it kind of signals to the market, to the horses and to the rabbits, that there's more profit opportunity. So we kind of watch this played out with China, right? When China banned mining, and then all this hash power went to freer areas, and the U.S. benefited geopolitically from that. And I think I from what I've been looking at, now even today, there's more mining going on in China than there was before the ban. The hash rate just keeps climbing, right? So that is a testament to the network itself and to the resiliency, even in the face of government oppression or banning or all these things that they try to do, that the network is still repairing and successful and succeeding despite these giant attacks.
That's correct.
Yeah. And then the other idea that you touched on, right? this is a protocol, a system, a money, for thousands of years, right? We're designing this for the future of humanity. And we're there's that quote that's like, we were too late to discover the world, and we're too early to discover the stars, but we're just in time to fix the money, something like that, right? So it is important to think about these risks over long time horizons, right? Because even something with, a tenth of a 1% risk, right, over 1,000 years, statistically is going to happen one of those years, right? So that is an important, concept to think about there.
Yes. That's the basis of what I think about a lot. And I think, like I said, I think people call me an alarmist. They may be accurate. I guess call me what you want, but like I said, my feeling is that if we don't stay vigilant about it, I think anybody that has a background in security, whether that's physical security or cybersecurity or whatever, the experts in those fields will say the most dangerous thing is somebody thinking that they're safe. The moment you think you're safe, you are now at the greatest point of exposure.